G'day Jaffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. Some Jaffa mates and I are about to head off on a 1 week long beach trip to Fraser Island. Now when it comes to beach travel, I found that there's two types of individuals. There's those that just grab the keys, jump in and go, and if that's you, turn this video off, get off your ass, and get out there on the beach. There are others, of course, like me, that want to try and protect the vehicle from the corrosive environment that the beach presents. The gritty sand and the salt spray are absolute killers on vehicles, and I want to give myself every chance of protecting that car. And that's what this video is going to be about. If beach travel preparation is something that interests you, stick around. Now there's two things that I want to try and protect this vehicle against. One is salt and one is sand. And we're going to tackle both of those looking at it from the interior and the exterior. Let's start with salt and let's start on the exterior. First thing I want to do is I want to try and protect the underside of this vehicle from all of that salt getting into those nooks and crannies and corroding those bare steel parts. How do I do that? Let's take a look at the tools of the trade. You've obviously got to have your rust preventative, in this case the Tectile, screwdriver to get the lid off the can, a mixing cup, a funnel for transferring, something to deliver the rust preventative, and we'll get back to that, something to clean it up with, and rags for cleanup. Now let's talk about this rust preventative delivery. I've used both of these methods. I've used an air gun, an atomizing air gun, and I've used these pressure pump sprayers, and this is just an inexpensive one from Super Cheap. Now, to be quite honest, I prefer the old cheapy spray over a decent air gun. And the reason for that is this sucker atomizes your rust preventative too much. And there's two disadvantages with that. One, it doesn't travel as far and get into as many nooks and crannies. And two, it's a bugger to clean up because you got this atomized spray everywhere. Now this delivery system, although crude, I find is actually a lot more effective. However, if you do choose to use a spray gun, my recommendation to you would be to use a large diameter tip, not a small diameter tip that you typically use for paint applications. And I'll show you what I mean. That tip there inside of the gun at the moment is a 1.2 mil. I would be using a 1.8 mil at least as a bare minimum. Why? Same reasons as I said before. You want to have a much larger droplet size and you want this stuff to carry. You do not want to atomize it too much. Now I'm going to use this Tectile 506. You can use anything. You can use a Lanatech or any other sort of a rust preventative. I've been using this stuff for probably 30 years now of beach travel, and I found it actually works really, really well. What I like about it is the fact that it does stick so well and remain in place. And even when I go into the outback and the underside of the car is getting flogged by gibbers and stones and everything, this stuff holds up reasonably well. Pour it out into a cup here, and let's get our consistency right. Now you can spray this stuff straight out of the can. I like to cut it a little bit with thinners. That's the thickness you can see running off of this ruler. And for me, that's just a little bit too thick. I'd like it a bit thinner so that it'll run into the cracks a little bit easier. So I'm going to start by cutting that down 2/3 Tectile, 1/3 thinner. And I just use a cheap cleanup thinners to do the cutting. It is really hard to give an accurate estimate of the consistency. You just sort of got to go by feel. If you end up spraying this stuff and you feel it's not running enough, just pull up stops and throw a little bit more thinners in. Conversely, if you think you thinned it too much, then just put a little bit more straight Tectile into your mix. Now when I'm spraying the underside of this car, I'm going to go over it 4 times. Now what does that actually mean? Let me use this spray bottle and the shower mat as an example. I've had to come indoors because of the wind blowing out there. Now let's imagine that shower mat's the underside of the car, and that is you and your spray gun. We'll tip that up on edge, so now you're laying on your back and the car's above you. And you're going along and you're spraying nicely. What's happened? You've got an excellent coating here, but you don't actually have anything hitting that side, hitting that way, hitting that way, or hitting that way. That's why I spray the car 4 times. So I'll start at the front and go to the back on an angle like that, and then I'll go from the back to the front, and then I'll go from the left to the right, and then I'll go from the right to the left. And you can see when I do that, we've got complete coverage in all those nooks and crannies. That's the best way that I've been able to come up with to ensure that I get every single angle underneath the car to the best of my ability. Now it's time to prep the vehicle before I actually get to spraying it. So I'm very fortunate in that I've got a hoist, so I don't actually have to lay in the ground like a dog and get bloody bindies or green ants in my back. However, I've spent a lifetime working really hard, so I've earned this thing. Now the first part of this job is I got to take these bash plates off because there's a lot of stuff under there that I want to protect and I can't get to it when these are in the road. Now, as I said, this crap goes everywhere, so I just want to minimize the amount of overspray that's going to float around and stick to the car, because this is like the proverbial, it sticks like shit to a blanket. Now, the other thing that I want to do, but you won't have to do if you're doing this outdoors, is protect the shed floor. This stuff takes quite a long time to dry, and that stickiness on the shed floor would just attract crap for weeks and weeks on end. All right, my prep work is all done. Got the floor protected, got the arms on the hoist protected. I've got this skirt that's sort of running around the perimeter of the car. Now I got my mix, it's my pressure pack. I'll just go along and spray the stuff down. And like I said before, I'm going to start at the front of the vehicle, work my way to the back, and then turn around and come forward again. And see how that plastic is sticking to my boots already? That's how messy this crap is. Alright, that chassis is finished, and if you have a look down here on the ground, you can see all of the overspray and the mess that this stuff makes. The trade-off for me of doing it in the shed is that I could get every little nook and cranny because the car is sitting above me. And if you have a look underneath, we are fully tactilized. So you can get up into these tight areas along the chassis rail, on the top of the chassis rail, etc., etc. Next, I'll pull this skirting off. I'll leave that stuff on the floor for the time being, just while this stuff drips a little bit more, and I'll let it sit here to dry for an hour or two. Just a couple of words of advice if you're spraying this stuff. One, don't wear glasses or a watch. You'll end up destroying them. Make sure you got some crap clothes on because they're going to get ruined as well. Wear a respirator device, especially if you're spraying it indoors like I am. If you are spraying it outdoors, try and spray downwind so that I've got all the mist and crap blowing away from me. And if you got a decent pair of gloves, those help a lot as well. The next thing I do is I just take this cheap crappy tire shine and I go through and I spray in the wheel wells and any of the bolts that I might have missed. I'll spray the tires, I'll spray the plastics. What I'm trying to do here is just lay down a protective coating. That beach sand and salt is going to stick to everything anyway, so I might as well throw on some tire shine so that when I get back and clean this car off, it comes off a lot easier because there's a barrier between whatever I was trying to protect and the salt or the sand. Now, I would never do this if I was going to do some outback traveling, for example, in really dusty conditions, because then all this tire shine will end up doing is just attracting crap to stick to it. But like I said, on the beach, everything's going to stick to it anyway, so we might as well get a barrier in place as best we can. You know, these bolts here, for example, holding on this small bash plate, you look at them and all the paint's pretty much chipped off of them. They're just going to rust like crazy out there on the beach. So just give them a little bit of a shot of tire shine, That's it. That'll protect them, and then when I get home, I'll wash it all off. And just with this tire shine, here's a free hack from Jafffa Adventures. If you do end up spraying a bit of that Tectile 506 onto your bright work, and you don't want to use thinners to cut it, tire shine works just beautifully. It's cheap, and it won't damage your paintwork either. So there's your little hack for free. You're welcome. Now I'm going to tackle under the bonnet. And again, I'm going to hit all of the under bonnet areas with some tire shine. And just to make sure you understand what my logic is here, the salt spray is atomized by the waves crashing against the beach. As you're driving down the beach, you can imagine you've got a 20, 30, 40 km/h wind blowing in through this radiator and all through this engine bay. So no matter how careful you are, that engine bay, and the rest of the car for that matter, is going to be coated in a very fine salt mist. Now the tricky bit with salt is its solubility. It is massively soluble. So let's say you're driving along, you've got your car covered in salt and it's reasonably dry out. As soon as you get into a moist environment, because it's got such a high solubility rate, that salt will dissolve. And as soon as it dissolves, it'll activate and it'll start the corrosive process. So what my goal here is to put a barrier between that salt and the engine until I can get a hose on the thing and wash all of the salt off. And that barrier for me is tire shine. I've been using this cheap crap for probably 20 years. And for this application, it works an absolute treat. Now I would never hit the engine bay with tire shine if I was doing an outback trip. And that's because all of that dust is just going to stick to this motor even more so than it would if there was nothing there. From a cleanup perspective, if I had tire shined it in an outback, I've got a big mess to clean up here. If I didn't use tire shine and I just left the engine bay raw, coming back from an outback situation, I'd probably just be able to hit it with an air hose and blow the dust off. So that's the reason I only go tire shine in its salty conditions. That's it, engine bay is all complete. Tire shine isn't sitting here dripping off of the engine, but I do have that nice little protective layer between the environment and all of the engine parts now. Having finished the engine bay, I can move on to the interior and I'll show you my tips there. What products do I use in the interior to protect it before I hit the beach? You know what? Absolutely nothing. And you're going to be going, hang on Terry, I call bullshit mate. You've put all sorts of products on the exterior. Why wouldn't you do the same thing in the interior? The logic should be the exact same. You know what? And you'd be absolutely right in pointing that out. But for me, there's one overarching reason why I don't use any product in the interior. The majority of my off-road work is done in outback and dusty places, not on beaches. And I find if I use things like either tire shine or Armor All or whatever, those types of products in the interior, I can never really get rid of that residual that sits on all of the components, and that attracts that dust like nothing else. So that's the reason I don't use any product in the car. Having said that, however, I do try and mitigate the amount of salt spray that the interior of this car sees. And I'll explain how I do that now. All right, use your imagination. We're cruising down the beach. It's a wonderful day. You got the window down, the wind's in your hair. You look up in front of you and you say, far out, there's a lot of salt spray up there. If that's the case, give yourself an uppercut, because that salt spray up there, you're driving through it right where you are right now. So it's a trade-off. Do you want to run down the beach with your windows open, feeling fine? Or would you rather protect the interior a little bit and put those windows up? That's your call, because it's a very individual point. But for me, up go the windows. The second thing you can do is use your brains and your HVAC system. See that little symbol right there? That is your recycle symbol. Hit that little puppy, and that means it's going to be drawing air from inside of the cabin and recycling it through the HVAC system. When that little puppy is off, it's pulling air from the outside. All of that salt mist is going through your HVAC system and it's being blown inside of your car. And that's about all you can really do for salt spray in the car. If that sort of gives you the heebie-jeebies, perhaps beach driving isn't for you. The other major contaminant when you're beach driving, of course, is sand. And you can do a little bit of work as well to help mitigate the sand ingress. And the first thing, of course, you can do is get yourself a decent set of mats. I can't recall what this particular brand is, but there's a couple of things that I do like about them. One, they've got swept up sides, so any sand that you bring into the car tends to stay inside of this little tray. Secondly, they're a harder plastic material, still flexible, but it's not rubberized. And I find that those rubberized floor mats, especially ones that have the little grooves in them or any fancy pattern, all of that stuff does is extract that sand. The sand sticks to it and the sand gets inside of those grooves, and it's an absolute bugger to get out. So get a decent set of floor mats. Same thing for the back of the car. Get yourself a decent set of floor mats. You can get those same type of dished mats that capture sand and dirt and the like. I don't have that. I've just got plain old carpet here in the back. I've got no back seats in the car, so no passenger's going to be back here throwing sand in that footwell. Our kids are all growing up now, but they were the worst. You tell them to clean your feet off before they climb in the car, and they'd give a half-assed attempt at it, but you'd have a look at their feet when they're inside of the car and you just shake your head. So I guess the take-home message there is nobody's going to care about the sand getting into the car as much as you are. So do whatever you can to try and prevent that ingress. The last little bit of advice I've got with these floor mats, grab yourself a bit of duct tape, stick it on the joins, and that'll just ensure that the sand doesn't get down in between the carpet and the floor mat. Well, there you have it, my tips for beach preparation. I've been doing this for about 30 years now, and I've got to admit my cars have always stayed in really good shape, and I put a lot of that down to doing the prep work that I showed you today and doing a cleanup after you get back from the beach. And I've already done a video on that. I'll just drop that in the comment section. You can have a look if that interests you. If you guys have got some great ideas in terms of beach preparation, I would love to hear them. Drop them down in the comment section. For me, it's time to pack this car up, get ready to head over to Fraser Island. You'll definitely see some video footage of that, and it'll be a little bit different than most of the videos you see on YouTube with respect to Fraser. Until next time, everybody, keep your shiny side up. Bye now.